Hey DC today we're going to look at how the government can help to fix the economy if there's a problem. As we've looked at with the macroeconomic equilibrium, sometimes our economy is not where it ought to be. Either we're experiencing a recessionary gap or we're experiencing an inflationary gap, and we got to do something about it. So the government steps in and tries to help. We call this fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the federal government's use of taxing and spending to keep the economy stable. It's very Keynesian, if you remember that, and it's very re-election friendly because fiscal policy generally sees the answer as the government will fix all your problems. So with fiscal policy, we're looking at GDP. Remember, GDP is consumption, investment spending, government spending, and exports and imports. But in this case, we're focusing on government spending. What we're saying is that no matter what you think, government spending is going to drive a change, and the government can be the answer. So, just for the record, fiscal policy is why I pretty much hate all the politicians. Because they're all wrong. All of them. They're all wrong. They're all wrong. Here's why. When we have something like a recessionary gap, as you can see over here, our equilibrium is to the left of our LRAS, which means the government's going to want to do something to shift from our first equilibrium back to an equilibrium that will be at a long-run, good quality location. To do that, the government has some choices. So we're going to do what we call expansionary policies to try to expand our economy. So when we're trying to increase output, there are two things that work. Thing number one, increasing government spending. If you look at GDP, if I increase the G in GDP, GDP goes up, aggregate demand goes up, I fixed my economic gap here. The other thing that I can do is cut taxes. If I cut taxes, that puts more money in the hands of people and businesses, the assumption being that they're going to go out and spend it, depending on what their MPC and MPS balance is. And so that would then generate economic output, increasing aggregate demand, and hopefully closing our gap. If I'm experiencing something like an inflationary gap, in this graph you've got a equilibrium point that is to the right of my LRAS, so I need to do something to put the brakes on my economy. I've got to shift from my first aggregate demand here to a second aggregate demand and a new equilibrium point that is at my long-run target goal. To do this, I'm going to do what I call contractionary policies to try to decrease output, to pull back from that inflation, to pull back from that kind of out of control growth that I'm experiencing. To do that, I can either decrease government spending, again, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. If I decrease the G, I decrease my GDP, I decrease aggregate demand. Or I can raise taxes, because remember, if I know that there's a tax increase coming, I've got to spend less because I got to save money to pay those taxes. That lesser spending by businesses and by individuals is going to pull back on aggregate demand and pull me closer to that second target equilibrium point that I'm trying to get towards. Do you see the problem? Do you see it? Because if I'm a Republican, I'm running on a policy where I want to decrease government spending and I want to decrease taxes. If you look back at what we just talked about, decreasing taxes is an expansionary policy. Decreasing government spending is a contractionary policy. If I do them both at the same time, I'm going to end up where I exactly am right now. Nothing's changing. If I'm a Democrat, I'm running on increasing taxes and increasing government spending. Well, as you know, increasing government spending, that's expansionary. Increasing taxes, that's contractionary. They've all got it to where it's not going to work. We have had some presidents who have successfully found a way to kind of find a center place here. So if you look at presidents like President Reagan, what did he do? He decreased taxes and he increased government spending. Those are both expansionary policies. What happened to the economy under Reagan? It expanded. Another great example we'll take from the other side of the aisle, Bill Clinton. What did he do? He had to deal with a Republican Congress. So when they wanted to cut taxes, he said, okay, that's fine, but we're going to cut taxes, putting money in the hands of the people, and we're going to increase government spending because I have some programs that I'd like to create, increasing aggregate demand, and you saw economic growth. When the two sides work together is when you have that quality sort of stuff happening. When they don't work together, when they're at a stalemate, that's when we tend to have long-term problems. Well, there are a couple of issues with fiscal policy that make it slightly harder than just dealing with the issue and creating an answer for it very, very simply. The problem is called a policy lag. A policy lag is a problem experienced in the timing of these policies. So we have the first thing that I call inside lag. An inside lag is like a recognition lag. It takes a while for me to figure out that there's a problem. Think about if you're trying to load a YouTube video or load a web page and you just see that circle spinning as your internet tries to connect. That's lag. It takes a while to figure out what you're trying to do. Well, those decision lags can create delays in implementing the monetary policy. I have to figure out that there's an issue. I have to figure out the solution to it. I have to come up with an idea. I've got to get it passed. And by the time I get it passed, maybe that problem is already gone. There's a whole nother problem I have to deal with. The other type of lag we have to deal with is an outside lag. Outside lag is like an implementation lag. Once I've created a policy, even if it's the best policy and I created it quick, the problem that I'm going to have is, well, it's going to take me a while to do it. If I say my problem is the economy is at a recession, my answer is I'm going to give every American back $5,000 on their taxes. That's not going to take effect tomorrow. That's going to take effect the next time Americans do their taxes. And by the time they do their taxes and the government has paid them money, you might find that you run into a problem. So let's say I gave you a series of questions. I want to see if you can figure out, can you figure out if we need to do expansionary, contractionary, or have no change in the economy? Think back to those economic indicators, and is this economy in a good place? So let's work our way through. The economy is suffering from its worst slowdown in 30 years. Unemployment's at 10%. What should I do? I look at those and I say, slow economy, high unemployment, I need an expansionary type of policy. The second one, the annual inflation rate is slowing and now stands at 2.5%. Ooh, slow inflation at 2.5%. You know what? That's actually a pretty decent economy. Don't change it, leave it alone, walk away. So the next one, we've had some good news and some bad news. Unemployment's at 2.3%, inflation's at 8%. So you have high inflation and really low unemployment. What do I need to do? Well, these two are going to sort of conflict with each other. Because if I'm fixing unemployment, I need an expansionary policy. But I'm currently experiencing high inflation. So which one do you deal with first? Economically speaking, you always deal with inflation. Make people a little bit sad, but pull back from that inflationary sort of status. Do contractionary things, and then deal with unemployment. So the next one, unemployment rate remains steady at 15%. What should I do? 15% is really, really high. I need an expansionary policy. I got to get jobs. I've got to kick my economy into gear and somehow expand what's going on. The last one, annual inflation rate is 8.5% and rising. What do I do? That goes back to the contractionary thing of deal with inflation first. Hope this helped. Make sure you are understanding everything in here and ask me if you have any questions.